Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of John Wayne Gacy, more on who he is, and just a little bit. For now, let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Okay, before diving into the backstory as to who John Wayne Gacy is, I want to give a little quick shout out to the fact that I have released a whole new line of merch. It is listed in the description of this video, so if you would like to be able to go and check that out and see if there are any items of clothing that you, or honestly, it's not even clothing, there's other items, it's a whole variety of things. It's over on Redbubble Shop, so if you want to go down into the Linktree link, check that out. Anything that you buy will be helping out the channel immensely, so appreciate that in advance. And that's all the shout out for that. Let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was responsible for one of the most horrific crimes in Chicago's history. Gacy was a building contractor who also worked as a clown named Pogo the Clown at children's parties, but underneath this seemingly innocent exterior was a monstrous individual who preyed on young men and boys. He lured them to his home just outside of Chicago for sex and then strangled them to death. At one point, he even stabbed one of his victims. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy killed 33 young men and boys. The remains were found under the crawl space under Gacy's suburban Chicago house, buried elsewhere on his property, or in waterways south of Chicago. In December of 1978, Gacy came to the attention of the authorities after a 15-year-old boy went missing in Des Plaines. This led to the discovery of the very first set of victim remains in the crawl space under Gacy's house. In March of 1980, Gacy was convicted of killing all 33 of his victims, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. He was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet on May 10th of 1994. But the case did not actually end there. In 2011, the Cook County Sheriff's Department announced that it was undertaking a new effort to identify the remains of 8 of Gacy's victims whose names were not known at the time. They had hoped that advances in DNA testing could help identify the victims. Over the next few years, the county was able to identify 3 of the 8 victims in 2011, 2017, and even so recently as on October 25th of 2021. However, that still leaves 5 of the victims unknown. So that's a little backstory as to who John Wayne Gacy is. We'll be going through an interview that is one of his most well-known interviews. This will be a 3-part video, so buckle on up and we'll go through it bit by bit. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
My question would be to you right off the bat is why, after so many years of silence, never having a media interview? And people have said that you have given them interviews in your...
Well, that's hogwash.
Yeah.
That's strictly hogwash.
So we're
constantly told that.
I want to go ahead and pause here. So this initial response, people have said that you have given interviews, and what immediately flashes across Gacy's face is this level of disgust. So you see it creep into the corner of his nose here. So we might be able to understand a little bit of his mindset behind that. He has that disgust towards people saying something that he has done. This could be a level of control. He doesn't like people claiming that he's done a thing that he hasn't actually done. This is not unheard of, especially in the serial killer realm. They like to have control over their stories, and it's very important to them. So already we're seeing that slip out that somebody else has said this and he's not happy about it. So let's keep watching.
Told that I'm misquoted constantly, saying that I said this and I said that, and it's not happened.
So that's pretty well established on this. This is the first time you're speaking publicly about your case.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always felt that my attorneys were handling it, and they said to keep low.
During that, the little micro head shake yes in there would be synchronized with the right or yes response. So at that time, even though I dislike John Wayne Gacy, he's being authentic here from what I can tell. Synchronized. He did not have any other interviews before this because he believed that his team was doing well. So let's continue.
To keep low profile and stay away from it. And in light of all that has been used against me in the media, they've created this fantasy monster image, and it's been going on for the last 12 years. And I've ever had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason that they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that garbage, and they painted this image of me that like I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Well, you were in.
All right, so during this time, what I find very fascinating, and what I have always found fascinating about how Gacy actually holds himself in front of camera during this interview, is he's not showing any signs of deceit during this time. So he's staying synchronized, but we also know for a fact that he was obviously guilty at the time. So that does let us know that Gacy, on some level, is very comfortable with lying, because there's an instance here for us to be able to see that. But we're also seeing, as he's describing what people are describing him as, his eyebrows lower, his eyes narrow. This is anger and scorn coming in there. There could be some disgust in the corners of the nose, but it is largely lying in that anger and scorn side of things, which is fascinating that he has scorn towards people calling him out for what he has already done. We're going to keep watching this to see how it unfolds.
Were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of homicide. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Fix that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, insofar as sound goes, if I'm down with my head, does that hurt your sound quality?
No, it's okay. Just don't try not to move around too much.
If you break into song, give it a cue.
Very interesting. So another thing that Gacy was considering doing was getting into politics as well, and this might be where this interesting idea of head positioning and movement in regards to sound quality and pickup, not a lot of people consider that. Even for the videos here, what you can't see is there's a microphone right here, so I have to kind of stay in this general area, and that's something that's practiced in. So for him to be able to bring that in lets us know that he's very well aware of this process, but then also it lets us know that he is wanting to be able to convey a storyline in a way that he has complete control over, even down to where he's trying to see where the audio is. It is masked as helpfulness, but we're seeing these areas here that John Wayne Gacy has a level of a need of control just from what we're seeing non-verbally slip out around these instances. So we're getting an idea as to how Gacy functions. Perhaps by the end of this, we'll be able to see a little bit clearer picture as to the mind behind the monster, so to speak. But let's keep watching.
Now I ain't going to break it at a song. We'll go into the lead-in as you know, you were at 1978.
Yeah.
You were present.
Yeah. Okay, that's the way I'd like to start, and I'd like to kind of.
What do you got there? Let's see your.
Well, I just like to go through the generalities, maybe talk about the background of the thing, the original case.
Again, in this area, nothing non-verbally, but you could see again, Gacy is trying overtly to control the situation, even down to trying to manage the conversation between himself and the profiler that's in the room, and so. So we're seeing Gacy has a huge issue with control. Maybe not a huge issue so far. It seems like it's substantial. And so I'm going to be keeping my eye out on that and then how that plays out into the actual rest of the case as well.
Bleeping of the language, I will watch the language.
Yeah, the trust. John does tend to slip into...
Well, I call it as I see it. Some people can't understand that. All right, so whenever the hell they're ready.
Now, give me kind of just an overview of the business that you eventually established, the construction work. Is this self-taught then, the construction and maintenance work?
I'm going to go ahead and pause here because this is going to be an important question to be able to establish some of his normal patterns non-verbally. Tell me about your construction business that you started. This one doesn't have too much to actually do with the crime itself, so it's a fairly decent baseline establishing question that will help us have clarity throughout the rest of the interview. So let's see how he addresses this, see what his authentic synchronized nonverbal communication looks like when addressing a question that has no weight behind it, and then we'll be able to compare and contrast that to the other times that he has more implicating questions.
Yeah.
Maintenance work?
I started doing painting, and then I started doing wallpapering and decorating, and inside of 3 years, PDM, which is painting, decorating, and maintenance, was doing $1 million a year.
And that was,
and I only had 4 employees.
And that was the business you were in at the time of the arrests.
That's correct. PDM.
All right, so something that I'm noticing here, his pitch, it rests at this lightly higher level here, so that seems to be his normal resting pitch. He's looking off to the side regularly while recollecting things, and that's synchronized as well. But what I'm noticing verbally about this is that he's also taking this chance to brag a little bit about his business. So we're seeing that Gacy has an element of a need of control. He wants to be able to seem impressive to people. So these are two aspects that are popping up here. We're wanting to be able to keep track of these as we continue through this video.
PDM in 1974 became a corporation, and then I owned PDM Contractors Corporation. I owned PDM Plumbing, PDM Concrete, and PDM Decorating. And then I branched off with another partner into Rafco Construction. And from there, we were doing strictly drugstores. John?
Now, they did not.
He has a very sharp memory and exact memory with various things in his storyline. So that is fascinating to be able to note. He's able to recall things fairly easily. And from what we're seeing non-verbally, it seems to be synchronized and authentic. So it's not like he's just making stuff up at the drop of a hat. So if he's able to recall details that quickly, that easily, even smaller ones about where he did certain business things and how it all went out, then we'll want to be able to pay attention during more implicating questions to see if he does have difficulty recollecting in those areas. Difficulty recollecting, this could be an indicator of deception, especially if he's trying to formulate or build some sort of false narrative for us to be able to understand. So let's see how he does this.
Not search the house at that time or look through the house?
No. According afterwards, they're claiming that they came to the front door of the house and knocked on the door and that I hid from them.
Why didn't you let them in at that time when they were knocking at the front door?
There was no way I could have heard them. I was way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. When they finally walked around the side of the house, I could look out the picture window, see them there, because I was on the phone, and they could see me clearly too, sitting on the couch on the telephone.
All right, so now we're getting a little bit more implicative with the questioning here. So what we're hearing is his pitch has increased a little bit. It has a little bit more strain and pressure behind it. That would be pretty logical, considering that now the questions are a little bit more intense. So we're feeling that anxiety come in. That is expected to be able to be heard. Along with that, we're hearing some vocal breaks in there as well. He was talking rather smoothly, and now he has some halting in there. He's also looking around substantially more than he was before. Now, this is a spike in his nonverbal communication. At this point, it's still so early on, and there hasn't been enough contextually around it to be able to say, oh, well, this is a sign of deceit, but it is a spike. So we can say for sure that he's feeling agitated as this line of questioning is coming on. Not enough to say he's being a liar here, but we do have our red flag system going off just a hair here. Let's keep watching.
Because I was talking to my sister in regards to a death in our family. So I told her that I would call her back, got up, went to the door, and he introduced himself as cousin Zach and Piquel, and they wanted to come in and talk to me about Robert Feast. And I had told him that I had not had any conversation with him, but I said, if you want to talk.
Fascinating. Okay, so he gives extra information about the phone call that he said he was on beforehand. Nobody cared who he was on the phone with or what they were talking about. Maybe there were going to be other questions and he was trying to be preemptive with those and answering those in front of things. However, that is packing his answer a little bit more. Extraneous details. Again, just a level of anxiety and agitation centered around this questioning. It's not pushing me to believe him. It is still making me wary of his words from this point out. And then he starts talking with this other person, and he does a very substantial manipulator up there by his nose. That is a possibility of a mouth blocking gesture, which those can slip out when a person says something that they feel like they shouldn't have. This could be a lie. This could be giving away personal information, anything like that. You might see any form of mouth blocking gestures come out. So that could be the possibility there. That also being said, he could just have an itch in that area. So I want to be able to make note of that substantial movement there and then keep track of it as we go on.
Talk to me, then come back there. And they wanted me to come down to the police station. Okay, well, I didn't have time because I was doing work for the county and stuff like that. Went into the police station finally on the next day. After cousin Zach and Piquel were at the house. They had asked me to come in and give me an account of my whereabouts. The thing of it is that
so obviously this is cut up fairly heavily, and trying to collect this entire interview to be able to go through it. Obviously, since it was on television, you get that. Anyways, the editing is going on through here, so because of all of the cutting in there, it's difficult for me to be able to see entire clusters of nonverbal communication in there. There wasn't anything for me to be able to make note of. I just wanted to let you know that, yeah, I agree. The cuts in there are a little annoying. It's just kind of what we have to work with.
Then that same day, they held me there for 9 hours, and while holding me there for 9 hours, they executed a search warrant. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. That is the search warrant where they claimed they went through the house looking for Robert Peace. It was written up to be looking for Robert Peace, and Robert Peace wasn't there.
The police had focused in on you.
All right, so during this time, we're hearing his vocal tone has shifted away from the stress and anxiety that was existent before. So it's fallen back down into his normal register. He's staying fairly consistent with his nonverbal communication. It seems pretty synchronized and authentic, and he's still recollecting these very, very minute details down to the dates and days. He's very detail-oriented. So we're seeing this still come out here. Interestingly, non-verbally, he's not showing a lot of desynchronization. Let's keep watching.
Focused in on you as being the suspect and the missing boy, and eventually...
well, they were following me around.
Following you.
Yeah, constantly. And on December 13th, I had made a statement to the police department, and from that date forward, they had me under surveillance. The only trouble is that the Mickey Mouse way they were doing it, they had 2 cars following me day and night, and they had trouble keeping up with me, so I used to go out to the car in the morning and tell them where I was going, so in case they got lost. Because at the time I was doing 5 construction jobs in 5 parts of the city. So in essence, I was all over the place. But this was like Keystone Cops trying to follow me around.
There's that one photograph of you and Rosalind.
Find that interesting. So he's trying to offer information to the people that are following him around. This lets us know a couple different things. One, he was obviously very well aware that he was under surveillance, even down to the number of cars, and that they were having trouble keeping up with him. This is another thing that's placing Gacy a little bit above everybody. They had trouble keeping up with me. So again, we're hearing a little bit of his ego slip in there. But then along with that, he's giving them information that's only partially useful. He's saying where he will be throughout the day at these various locations so that they can get there and see him there. But what he even says verbally himself, again on repeat, is that they had trouble keeping up with him as he was going around the city. That does kind of empty out a little bit of his own alibi to where it's less reliable in that he's saying himself that people could lose track of him quite easily. But we're understanding a little bit more about Gacy. Let's keep watching.
You and Rosalind Carter.
Yeah, Mrs. Rosalind Carter. Well, the Secret Service tries to cover it up and say, well, we don't know how he got into the picture. Hell, I was in charge of the reception. I had to stand at the door and let them know which politicians were allowed in and which ones weren't. The thing of it is, but the Secret Service wanted to cover up and make it sound like that I had no business there. I was cleared, and I was with the Secret Service at the time and setting up the parade route and everything, because I used to set up the parades for the Polish Alliance. And then for 3 years in a row, I had set up the parades to run.
I'm going to go ahead and pause. So while he's talking about the Secret Service there, he does have a lot of action in the corner of his nose, and now that could be discussed, and it's something that I want to be able to keep track of. However, along with that, it is a slight indication of a smile that he seems to be having in regards to this entire misunderstanding from the Secret Service. And I'm curious if this level of disgust that I might see in the smiling might possibly be duping delight. So that's another area that I want to be able to keep track of. Perhaps there was something, some detail around that he wasn't sharing fully, or that wasn't quite authentic. Regardless, he did have that level of possible duping delight and possible disgust on his face while talking about that. I would want to keep that in mind as the interview goes on, especially if the instance is readdressed.
And, that's a big feat, getting 20,000 Polish people to go in one direction at one time. The subdivision where the Summerdale house is located is built on a clay field, and when it rained, the rain would come down from both ends and would flood from one house to the other. The crawl space would fill up with water. In 1976, I asked the landscaper, I said, what do you do for that sour odor of clay? And he said, spread white lime, just regular masonry lime. On the ground, he said, it'll sweeten up the clay and you won't have that odor. Sort of like what charcoal does in filtering things. That's why the lime was spread in the crawl space.
How much lime was spread down there?
Very interesting here. So now we're talking about odor deterrence. And we're talking, he gives, again, this very specific date. Now, in this specific year, I asked the people about the clay field and how that might, and so he's offering these details, again, that it's a fairly poignant response to what the questioning was having. So, I thought that just one of the parts that I have found most fascinating about Gacy is the speed at which he responded to questioning. And it lets me know at very, very minimal level, he's very intelligent, because if he's able to more or less ad-lib these responses here at the drop of a hat, then that lets me know that he's been thinking about it, considering it, and he's ready to respond on many different levels with even dates. So he's prepped for this. Very fascinating. Let's keep going.
Down there eventually.
I think 700 or 800 pounds of it. The first search warrant was executed on
700 or 800 pounds of this odor deterrent. Now, if I remember correctly in the researching that I was doing, the other houses around did not require this level of treatment for clay odor because of the water, especially with that level, that amount of it. It just seemed like an excessive amount. And sure enough, obviously, it wasn't necessarily actually to cover the odor of clay, but more so the odor of much more gruesome things. Let's keep watching.
Was executed on December 13th. However, what is strange is you had 20 trained officers that came into the house, supposedly went down in the crawl space, crawled around. There was no mounds of dirt, there was no odor, there was no nothing. I never feared anybody going down that crawl space. The clowning was relaxation for me.
So, dear, that I find that fascinating. I never feared anyone going down in that crawl space. He has a micro shake. No, he does break eye contact during that time and look down and to the side. That could be a level of shame, perhaps, possibly. Not dead certain on that front. However, he's also trying to now pin it on the people who were doing the initial look around and investigation of his property with the warrant, and saying that they went down there and there were no mounds of this and there was no mounds of that, there were no odor, blah, blah, blah. He's very aware of what the down underneath his house area looks like, which would make sense in two different areas. One, he is a contractor, so it might make more sense that he's just hyper aware of what's going on under there. But also, he just was a... We good? But also, he was obviously a serial killer who buried a bunch of bodies down there, so he would know pretty well as to what the condition of it is down there as well. Just interesting things that we're being able to make note of. Let's keep watching.
For me, I enjoyed entertaining kids. Like some people are, they unwind in different ways, either by going out drinking or that. I could put on clown makeup and I was relaxed. And I enjoyed doing it. It was only twice a month that I did it.
Yeah, this was not used then for a lure to draw kids to you
No, we would visit different hospitals and entertain the children there. And we didn't entertain them with handcuffs or anything like that. All we used was balloon animals and small toys and stuff like that. But we also did parades. And maybe
this was a questioning that was had. Why did he bring up, no, we didn't entertain them with like handcuffs or something like that. That's weird. I've never been to a singular magic show, seen a street perform. Anybody who is like, all right, I'm going to use handcuffs now on the children. Fair. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that, Gacy. Maybe that was a question that had been brought up before and I'm just not aware of this. However, that clarification is really, really interesting. Now, the nonverbal communication around his recollection and telling of his activities as a children's clown, it leaves me feeling uneasy, not because of his nonverbal communication, but because of the activity itself in contrast with everything else. It's just a very fascinating hobby that he has here. Oh. Yeah. I'm not sure that he did use it for like the question there, any form of luring his victims, but it doesn't settle well with me that that's his place of relaxation. I don't know. Just strikes me as odd. Let me know in the comments if you feel how you feel about him being that age and a man and a clown at the birthday parties for the children and things like that. You let me know. Anyway.
And in the summertime, like on 4th of July, I used to be in 4 parades in one day. I've always told people when I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself or just let yourself go and act a fool. You could.
Ooh, that's a fairly telling thing for us to be able to hear from Gacy. When you put on the clown stuff, you can be yourself. But he also says that when you put on the clown makeup, garb, everything, he regresses into childhood. And then he clarifies that regressing into childhood is being himself. So that is a fascinating, just verbal tell as to his mindset behind things. Why is him being childish making him feel like he's able to be himself? This is usually indicative of a possible trauma early on when somebody feels like they are functioning largely in this childish state. Perhaps that's an area there. Maybe something happened in his past, in his childhood, that caused him to have that comfort zone placed there. Not positive, but I do find that very fascinating that for him, acting childish was acting himself, letting loose. Very interesting. All right.
Could be slapstick and funny and have a good time. That's why I always enjoyed clowning. Clowning has taken a bad name because of what they've used in my case.
On a historical note, your Iowa conviction goes back to what year?
Perhaps it's somewhat because of Gacy that clowning has taken a bad name. I doubt it. I doubt that it's all due to Gacy, and it's fairly egotistical of Gacy to say that, which does fit in with what we've seen so far of his need for control, his inflation of his own ego. And so like that does make sense now that he's also trying to say that it was because of him that all of clowning got a bad name. Yep. All right, let's keep watching.
Iowa conviction goes back to what year was that?
1968.
68. And what was, just in a nutshell, without getting in too deeply, what was the basis of the Iowa conviction?
The basis of it was a sodomy conviction. It's the only thing I ever was sentenced to was a sodomy conviction. They're claiming that the state representative's son, who was on the other party, he claims that he was sexually abused by me. And in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation. And it was consensual. I moved to Waterloo, Iowa. I was honored as Man of the Year.
Okay, so now we're hearing this facet of things. And so it sounds to me as if he's just admitted to some level of explicit interaction with somebody who is now not so happy with the situation, and he's claiming that it was consensual. This is one of those areas that it's so difficult to be able to navigate post situation, because now it ends up being a they said situation. And so with that, there's not enough non-verbally around that to look at Gacy's nonverbal communication and be like, oh, he's being authentic and synchronized here. So yes, obviously he's probably being truthful here. It's just too muddy. But because of this, now we know that he is in fact willing to engage in sexual acts with other men. So that fits in line with the profile that he had as the serial killer, which then I also find fascinating because earlier he had a level of scorn and possible disgust in regards to people calling him a homosexual. And I'm wondering if this is a cultural thing for him. Perhaps that disgust was something that came out culturally at the time as people were less educated and a little bit more narrow-minded in regards to that. Possibly that's in there. He might have even had some scorn or disgust towards himself. It's just a fascinating thing to be able to make note of, the contrast between those two things. Let's keep watching. There's not too much left.
Because besides working full-time, I also, I was a chaplain for the JCs and also ran the membership campaign. And of course, we used pornography. We had stag shows, and that's how we increased the membership from 150 to 400 members in that JC chapter. We were dealing with porno films, and we had the girl set up in a room in that. So it was, the thing to do. We were boosting membership from it. So nobody said a word about it.
That's... I don't know. Do I need to comment on that? That's gross.
At the time, this young individual made the charge at me. He was blackmailing me. He wanted more and more money. He said, look, I gave you a blowjob. Now you got to pay for this. I said, go see your father. He wasn't getting along with his father. But they came down heavy on me.
But how about your dad, Jen? Well, you had mentioned that you could never really please him, that he had talked of you.
And I didn't hate my dad either.
But he did have a hard upbringing with him, did you not?
My dad came from the old country, limited education, but he was a good provider, and with strong will and strong views. He was also an alcoholic, sorry to say.
Was he abusive? Did he strike out at you?
When he drank, he was almost like a different person. My dad struck all of his children all the time. Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and pause that there, because it also does rather reflect earlier what we saw when he was referring to himself being able to revert to the state of a child, to feel more himself and let loose. And now we're hearing that his dad was an alcoholic who was abusive towards everybody when he was a child. So now we're hearing this possible trauma lineup, which does make sense in context with everything. So from this first little clip, the first third of this interview, we're able to establish that Gacy has control issues. He has an inflated ego. He had trauma early on in his life. He is active in the homosexual lifestyle, but has disgust and scorn towards that himself as well. All of this is painting a interesting picture of the mind behind Gacy, the conflict that was in there, the inflated ego, everything that goes into this. So I feel like we're on a good start for this series. I hope that you're excited for the next few. They'll be coming up rather rapidly. If you do have any other requests for other serial killers, or if there's like any drama, really, if there's anything that you're interested in, I enjoy nonverbal communication, so I'm interested to look at just about anything. So let me know in the comments below. Again, go and check out the merch if you follow the Linktree link and go there. It's like at the very top. It's very easy to find. Worked really hard on getting this all together, so please go check it out. And if there's something that you do enjoy, go ahead and purchase it. And once it arrives, for anybody who has actually gotten any of the merch so far, once it arrives, I would absolutely love it if you were able to tag me on social media if you're okay doing that sort of thing. It's really cool to be able to see people enjoying some of the designs and whatnot like that. So go check that out. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit subscribe. Do all those things. You know the drill that every YouTuber says at the end. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.